Got an old Bassman in. I don't know yet which year, which model. I've done a bunch of work for the owner of this particular amp before, and I know what he likes, and he knows what kind of work I do. And the ticket just says, go through, fix everything. So he was basically asking me to treat it as if it were my amp and what I would do if it were mine. So allons-y. There's a whole lot of yuck here, and the Tolex is all peeling up. I can fix all that. A lot of rust on these screws, as if this amp has been exposed to a lot of moisture. And the power cable is all stiff. It's like the plastic rubber of it has gotten very, very hard. It doesn't matter. It's an old two-prong. It's going away. All right, I got the screws out. Take the straps off. All the Tolex will get cleaned. The flappy bits will get re-glued down as much as feasible. This looks like it's one of the chassis that has one of the nickel coatings. I love those. I think it's probably 65, 66, maybe 67. We'll find out in just a moment. There's a lot of debris in here. This will get taken outside and blown out in a little bit. I'm always cautious when I get to this part, because sometimes the Tolex flaps like this are happening on the front, and they can get bunched up, and they can make the panel get really tight against the cabinet, and you can get bends in the front, bottom corners and top corners of the faceplate if there's a unexpected binding there. It all feels good. Yeah, it's that pretty nickel underneath there. All this stuff, all this yuck and little incipient rust should clean up just fine. I'm seeing original with a little bit of what the F. You'll see it in a moment. Now, I had recorded this whole section earlier, or I thought I had. It didn't record. I hit the wrong button, sorry. So I'm redoing this part. So pretend that these chassis grounds are still made where they used to be. That'll make sense later in the video. This white stuff that's coating everything, that's the WTF I mentioned. That's just zinc oxide. That'll all clean up. There's a 66 date code there. I'll make sure when I clean the chassis that doesn't get affected. All the bias stuff is original. AB165, all original. All in really good shape aside from electrolytics that all need to be replaced. Some more of that rust. This thing got wet or was subjected to very high humidity at some point. That screw is really in a bad way. But nothing too worrisome. If you hear an odd sound in the background, my wife is either applying a lot of pepper to dinner or she's taking up the maracas. I'm not sure which. 66, 66, 66 on the transformers. Let's remove the cover and see what awaits us. I imagine this is also going to be all original, which could be fine, though in need of replacement. It could be a horror show. I imagine this will be a little bit difficult to get off because of that adhesive. Yeah, this has never been off before. Yeah. As expected. Le beau jus. Time for these to go bye-bye, but nothing's burned. So that's nice. Something else I like to do at this point of the inspection is make sure that the screws holding the transformers are tight. They often come loose. And that one's loose. I don't want to strip it, but it keeps turning. That either needs to go up to the next size up sheet metal screw or be drilled out and replaced with a new machine screw with a lock nut on the other side. This one's loose. That one's okay, and I'll tighten this one up from the other side. Let's pull these two JJs. They may be just fine, though they could use a cleaning. But I'm going to take them out until it's ready to... Everything's been changed out and it's ready to play again, because I like to have this upside down on my bench and I don't want the weight being on the tubes. So let me tighten the hardware for the power transformer and we'll proceed. So for the bias, if I can get my tool in there, make sure that's tight as can be. Actually, no, we're going to loosen that because they used a ground lug rather than going to chassis. We're going to redo that connection straight to chassis. And I've mentioned this in a lot of other Fender videos, but for some people, a lot of people probably, this may be the first vintage Fender restoration you've seen me do. And these ground lug connections are not specifically reliable. The transformers in these things are very heavy and they strain the connection and they can actually deform the chassis. I'll put a Kep's nut there, and the hardware comes loose. And when that hardware comes loose, you don't have a ground. So rather than make the connections to chassis for these grounds using these ground lugs, and I'll get this one out right now too, we will make the connections to the chassis, directly to chassis, the way they were right before that, before this. Now I have seen amps from '66 which have the solder joints made directly to chassis, and this 66 has the solder joints made to these ground lugs. It's not as bad as the later ones where they just had huge gobs of solder, but I'm not sure exactly when they did it, when the change happened. And there may be some 65s with the hardware, and there may be some 67s which use the chassis grounds. I do not know. Keep meaning to ask my friend Nick Grabian about that. He's a really neat guy and a Fender historian. When I'm not kicking the camera, I know these circuits very well, but he knows all the little historical details. He could probably tell you what Lupe had for lunch on any given Thursday. So one of the things I've been meaning to ask him is if he has hard and fast dates for when Fender or various models, if they were done on different lines, went from the soldered chassis connections to these ground lugs. This one doesn't seem to be original. It might be. Just doesn't have the right look to me. So new Kep's nut in and cranking it tight. And a new one here. I'm doing this now just so that I don't forget. I mean, this is the part where I usually tighten the chassis hardware, stuff like transformers. So I'm doing it all at once now so I don't forget, because otherwise if I stop and come back to it, I'll think, oh, I already did that. when you're a one-man shop, you can have a whiteboard and checklists all you want, but sometimes it's better just to have a routine that this is what I do. I do this, then I do that, then I do the other. Now, given the amount of bulging on those filter caps and how old the amp is, I'm not going to be powering this on. I'm going to be changing all that stuff out before it gets powered on. But also, at this point in my fender checkups, I want to make sure it has the correct fuse and that the fuse holder is tight and good contact is being made. Bassman MDL 5 amp fuse, 2 amp, 5, 2. This amp could easily have died with all those filter caps being on the verge of blowing up, and a 5 amp fuse, this could have been a fireball. So the owner or the previous owner, if the new owner just bought this, got lucky. So I will put this 5 amp fuse in my stash of used but possibly good fuses, and I will put in a brand new 2 amp 3AG slow blow because I'm a nice guy. And I've shown this before, but I think it's a good thing to keep putting out there. When I put the new fuse in, you can't see all this because of the focus depth, but I try to put it so that when you pull it out, you can read the writing. If this end were in here, you wouldn't be able to see it, and just an extra step. So all this will get cleaned up later. But I just want to make sure that this is all working properly and tightens up right. Yeah, that all feels good. Okay. At this point, I'm gonna get my parts list together for everything this amp needs. So all new electrolytics and new power cable. I'm going to take this outside and brush it off and get a lot of this yucky white stuff out so it doesn't go all over my bench. And then this amp's going to get the first of a few alcohol baths in majorities of areas to get all this stuff out that brushing won't get. I'll take care not to lose that stamp with 66 on it. And I will talk to the owner about various things that can be done about the noise of the AP165 phase inverter and what he would like. Does he want it a full restoration to what it originally was, or does he want it to be a much better sounding amp that's still true to the spirit of what you want from an AP165? More on that to come.